Hey, what's going on, people? Just decided to make a quick reply video to some of the comments I got on my Rocky Marciano Mike Tyson video. I'm gonna have to try and keep it short because the last video I made was too long. So basically, I'm just gonna try and counter each point and try and make you see that the argument is really futile. Mike Tyson and Rocky are both great legends. You can't say that Mike Tyson is a bomb, first of all, because Mike is in the Hall of Fame, youngest heavyweight champion, unified the title. He did what he had to do. Did he live up to his to expectations? No, he did not. But while he was great, he was great. Rocky Marciano, undefeated heavyweight champion, retired undefeated, known for his heart and whatnot. Good. I respect that. He's one of my favorite fighters. And it's easy to assume that I like Mike Tyson because I'm black and he's black, but that's a dumb statement. One of my favorite fighters is Jack Dempsey, and he's white. I like Gene Tooney, he's white. I like Jim Jeffries, and he was racist and white, and I still like him as a fighter. So it's not about race, but it's about being objective and rational. Rocky Marciano became champion in an era where there was no real competition to speak of. Someone was telling me that I shouldn't bring up the issue of fighting prime fighters, but I will bring it up. Because a lot of people say that, oh, Mike Tyson beat an old Larry Holmes and all the other people were bums. Look at Rocky Marciano. Archie Moore, Ezra Charles, Joe Walcott, Joe Louis, all in the twilight of their careers. None of them in their prime. While Rocky Marciano was in his best, absolute physical prime, at his very best. And in many of those fights, he still had to come back from behind to win. Take away those guys, who do you have left? Rex Lane, Roland Lastarza, Harry Kid Matthews. None of those guys are even in the Hall of Fame today. And none of those guys would compare to any of the contenders from the 80s. So how can you debate that Mike Tyson beat bums and old guys, and then in the same statement say that Rocky Marciano was better because he beat this person and then beat all these other guys that were basically bums too? Doesn't make sense to me. But I'm not even gonna go there. The main thing is styles make fights. Rocky was a swarmer. He relied on stamina and endurance and power. He could fight with you for 12 rounds and punch you at the same pace and with the same power each round. That's what made him dangerous. He wasn't slick. He wasn't scientific. He was definitely no Gene Tooney. But he had heart, yes, I'll give him that. However, if you take Mike Tyson from 1986 to 1987 and put him in that era, Mike would have been 100-0. Who could beat Mike in that era, in his prime? You're going to say Archie Moore? At what age? 40? 38? Ezra Charles? Old? Joe Louis? None of those guys had the speed or reflexes to compete with Mike at that point in time. Maybe in their primes, they would have given Mike a hard time. Absolutely, I believe it. In their primes, yes. But not at that age. After all, Muhammad Ali lost towards the end of his career. He lost to Spinks, and everyone knows that in their primes they would not even be in the same ring. You can't even put the same names together, but Muhammad Ali lost to him later in his career because he was losing his physical gifts. Those fighters were not the same that they used to be when they faced Rocky, and they were still capable of being competitive with him. Rocky had to struggle to beat Ezra Charles. He had to come back from behind to beat Walcott. He had to come back from behind to beat Moore. And even with Joe Louis, the first few rounds were actually very competitive. And these guys, when they were fighting, if you watch their tapes from before, when they were younger, and compare it to when they fought Rocky, you would see that they were not the same fighters. So what kind of argument is that? Take away those guys and you're left with basically nothing. Over 35, actually, what, he's 49-0. 35 out of all the guys that Rocky Marciano beat are basically virtually unknown. Or not unknown as in no one knows their names, but They're nothing. They're not even in the Hall of Fame, nothing. Rex Lane, Roland Lastarza, Harry Keith Matthews. These guys, Don Cocknell. Watch the fights. You know, I don't understand how people can make those statements and tell me that they're not basing it on emotion or race. Because if you're basing it on logic, you would know. Look at the styles. Tyson was bigger, stronger, faster, smarter in the ring than Rocky Marciano was. And you may say Tyson had a class jaw. That's dumb. It means you don't watch boxing. The people that knocked Tyson out always did it late in the round when Tyson got tired, and he's never been knocked out cold in his career. Tyson could take a punch. In his prime, he got tagged a bunch of times. He didn't drop. He went against really hard punchers. Razor Ruddock hit hard. Many of the guys he faced hit hard, and they still couldn't drop him. And in order to really beat Tyson, you had to control the fight from the outside, or dirty box the way Evander Holyfield did. But then again, the Tyson that fought after he got out of prison wasn't the same Tyson that became champion. In his prime, when he was following Cosdamaro's teachings and when he was training with Rooney, he stuck to the fundamentals. Constant upper body movement, set up combinations, kept his face and head protected. He basically became a one-punch knockout hunter later in his career. He didn't stick to any of the fundamentals and basically used intimidation to beat his opponents. But in his prime, technically he was a beauty to watch. And the problem is many of you guys don't even fight. So you base it based on perception. You base your judgment based on perception. But if you fight, you will appreciate what you see. You watch Mike Tyson in his prime, not just the knockouts. I don't watch Mike for the knockouts. I watch him for the combinations, for the little things that he did that people don't even appreciate. His defense, his ability to bob and weave, slip jabs and hooks and get inside and destroy you. He makes it look easy, but it's not. If you watch that and you look at the amount and then take into consideration that he had really fast hands and he was extremely accurate, he was deadly. There's a reason he was the champion in that period of time. There's a reason why no one could beat him in his prime. And it's not because he faced bombs. Those guys were not bombs. Those guys were all champions. The guys he beat were champs. It's not like he won one version of the heavyweight title and then relaxed. No, he was the undisputed heavyweight champion. He beat every champion there was in a dominating fashion and held on to those titles before he became retarded. And when he got out of prison, fighting at basically 60% of his old self, he was still able to almost unify the title again. Frank Bruno, Pinklon Thomas, what's his face? Trevor Berbick, they were not bombs. They were not great. I don't consider them Hall of Famers or legends. No, I'm not saying that. But they were not bombs. And they were a lot better than the guys that, those Roland Lastarza and Rex Lane. Heck, they were even better than the old champions he beat. How can you compare old fighters with champions that were in their primes? Stylistically, there was nothing Rocky Marciano had that could beat Mike Tyson. And even if Rocky Marciano had crazy knockout power, how can you punch something you can't hit? How can you knock out someone you can't hit? You think Mike would stay there and wait for Rocky to knock him out? Mike was more accurate and moved more. Rocky was good at sleeping against jabs. Like, he moved side to side to sleep jabs. But he wasn't a bob and weaver. He didn't keep his hands up all the time. He wasn't that hard to hit, and he caught very, very easily. And you're going to put him with one of the fastest hands in the heavyweight division, and someone that was heavier than him, physically stronger than him. Because no matter how strong you think Marciano was, his strength relied in the fact that he could punch you at the same intensity in the later rounds while you got tired. Whereas He didn't have that kind of power that could knock you out with one punch in the first round. Even though you may believe he did not. Watch the tapes, look at the record. He has a high knockout ratio because he outlasted his opponents. And then he was able to knock them out because they no longer had anything to go against them. But Tyson would have hit him many times by the time, before the end of the first round, Tyson would have hit him so many times. He would have been bleeding all over the place. Look at what Ezra Charles did to him. Ezra Charles was able to mess up his face. And that was a slower, less reactive Ezra Charles. Not the same Ezra Charles that fought Joe Louis back in the day. If that Ezra Charles could do it at that age, what would Mike Tyson do? That doesn't take anything away from Rocky Marciano as a fighter. He's a legend. He will always be a legend. But keep things in perspective, man. Damn. What makes heart? You're saying that heart will make Rocky Marciano beat Mike Tyson? Oscar Bonavena had heart. Query had heart. George Chuvalo had heart. Were they champions? No. But they had a lot of heart. Boxing is not all about heart. Yeah, heart is important. But it's about skills. It's about styles. It's about... That's why I say some people, they need to get into the ring and fight. Get into the ring and fight. Get knocked out a few times. I know. Then you will appreciate what I'm talking about. Styles make fights. I believe there are some other legends that Rocky Marciano could beat because his style was better suited for them. But Mike Tyson was definitely not the style you want to give against Rocky. It just doesn't work. Rocky would have been perfect for Mike Tyson. That and the size difference alone, it's just too much. 180 something against 216. And the other guy, the bigger guy, is more accurate, has faster hands than you. And on top of that, Rocky got caught easily. And then it's not like Rocky was unknockoutable. He could be knocked out. It's just that no one that he ever faced was able to actually get there. That's the thing. Ezra Charles was very, very tough for Rocky Marciano. And Ezra was nowhere near. Ezra was fighting at like 60% of his old self. Archie Moore. And Tyson hit harder than those guys. A lot harder. And even if Tyson didn't hit as hard, he would have hit Rocky Marciano often. And no matter how tough you are, no matter how strong of a chin you have, you can be knocked out. Trust me. Enough punches with enough power will knock you out eventually. What makes you think that Rocky could just pull off the Suzy Q and knock Mike Tyson out just like that? It doesn't work like that. Rocky would have had to go deep into the rounds in order to knock Mike Tyson out. And you know how much punishment he would have had to endure for that? That's the man. And then you start talking about competition and whatnot. They are basically similar, if that's the case, if you're going to talk about competition. It's hard for me to understand why people make these debates. It's very simple. Why if that's the case, why didn't Rocky come out of retirement to beat Floyd Patterson? He said he didn't want to fight Floyd. He didn't want to become a defeated champion, which means he feared Floyd Patterson, and Floyd Patterson was basically a smaller version of Mike Tyson, style-wise. So if he didn't want to go against Floyd Patterson, who was like Mike Tyson light, what makes you think he would go against Mike? The only person he ever considered coming out of retirement for was Ingemar Johansson. That should tell you something. Rocky Marciano was great, but keep things in perspective. Don't call me biased, because I know I'm not. I watch the tapes. I fight. I know what I'm talking about. Maybe y'all need to watch the tapes. Later, guys.